Welcome, everybody. I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for joining. I hope that you get so much out of this conversation. I hope that you sit back, you soak it all in, because this is going to be a conversation of hope, of empowerment, and of inspiration. And I welcome you here, and I welcome Dr. Dillon Caswell here as well. Dr. Caswell is a doctor of physical therapy and a board certified sports specialist. He is so excited to share this message of hope with you. He's excited to empower you, and he's really just passionate about spreading a message of hope and healing to all people. And so, Dillon, I thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's an honor to be here, and I'm so excited for this project and to get this message out there to so many people that are suffering, that need to hear that they are enough. People can hear that they are going to heal and that they can get back to these things that they love, or they can become the person that they desire to be. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm honored. I'm blessed to have been called to do this work, and I'm so excited to be here with you and for everyone watching and listening to this. I just hope that we can help get this message out.
Yeah, thank you again for being here. I'm so excited to dive into all the details of the book. Dr. Caswell has written a book called Hope Not Nope, and so we're going to dive into that today. Before we get into the details, I would love for you to share what motivated you and inspired you to even start this work and start this book.
Oh, it's funny if you asked me back in high school and then through college, whether it was undergrad or graduate school, if I ever had plans of writing a book or becoming an author, and I probably would have laughed hysterically because I struggled in English, I struggled with grammar, and so I never thought that I was going to write this thing. So it was a little fearful to get into it and start writing it, but it honestly started as my journal.
Mm.
I graduated with my doctorate in PT and I started working in the clinic. I was gifted to work in this amazing clinic with Dr. David Boyland, who really mentored me to treat people as humans, not as their diagnosis. And through that, from the clinic environment that he set up, we encountered so much suffering. And in the process, I was getting really angry with what people are being told about their bodies that was really flat out lies. Like
Mm.
not just misinformation, but flat out lies. And they're being sold these packages to keep coming back to this thing at other facilities to get this thing that's not going to get them to where they could be. And so it was frustrating. And being a new grad and being young in the field, I didn't know what to do because at first I was like, let's change the system. Let's go to Capitol Hill. Let's petition. Let's do all these things and change the system. And I quickly realized that no, the best change that we can make is that person that we're with right then and there. But I was having difficulty doing that because I was getting angry at all the stuff that they were being sold and all the stuff that they were being told, and the fact that instead of transformation, they're getting transactions just over and over and over again. So I started as a journal just as my outlet to
Mm.
basically just get all this out so that when I went into clinic the next day, I could try to be the best version of myself for that person and not hop on the phone calling other providers and going, what the heck are you doing with this person?
Mhm.
So it was really to like calm me down and to just chill out before I was working with people.
Sure.
And then I quickly realized that I can keep complaining about this or I can attempt to be the change. And this was the start of it. Like by no means is it perfect, but I just honor people and I want to love on people and I want people to love themselves. And keeping a journal to myself wasn't going to accomplish that.
Yeah.
So it just kind of kept building and building and building, which eventually turned into this book, which was a 3.5 year process to
Yeah.
write. So when I say that I'm excited that it's here, it's like I'm so excited that it's
Sure.
here.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for just sharing all of that and just your heart for people who are suffering. And I'm sure in your field you've encountered so many people suffering, not just as clients, but probably even just coworkers and people that you've met on a regular basis. It doesn't stop and it doesn't start just in a physical therapy room. It's all across this country, it's all across the world. And so thank you for just driving that. And one of the things I loved about the book as I was reading it is you really just lay out a blueprint of, this is evidence that we can look at, not, hey, this is just my ideas or my concept, but true evidence that people can look at, of scientific evidence of, hey, why don't we start looking at this? Why don't we start um, asking ourselves, like, why do we say the things that we say? Why do we believe the things that we say when they're negative or pulling us down or dragging us down or even other people down with us? And your work is truly to kind of shift that. And the blueprint that you outline in the book shows that desire to shift that and to inspire and empower the people. And so what do you think really drove that desire to like lay out the blueprint but also to show the evidence as well?
Yeah, it's interesting how I got to this blueprint because, to tell you the truth, I almost quit PT school.
Wow.
And it wasn't because of the academic challenge, it was because of what we were being delivered. I went to a phenomenal school, had phenomenal professors, but they still had to teach to the boards and to the system. At the end of it, you start looking at, this isn't Brandy that's coming into the clinic. This is a shoulder injury that's coming into the clinic.
Mm,
Why am I calling you by your injury instead of calling you by your name? Why am I dissociating your injury from who you are as a person?
wow.
Why do I ask how you are and then ask how your shoulder is? Is your shoulder not part of you anymore? So I really was getting fed up with this message and how things were being done. So we were doing clinic picks, and this clinic came up, and the professor goes, "All right, all I can tell you about this clinic is that it's different."
Mm.
I had the third pick that semester for the clinical. I raised my hand and I said, "Please send me there." None of the professors knew what was going on in here. They didn't know that I needed something different to be able to stay in the program to eventually earn my doctorate and become practicing in
Sure.
clinics. So being at that clinic really saved my profession and my path. And being there helped me to unlearn some of these messages that I got, that you're not a shoulder patient, you're not a back patient, you're a human being coming in
Mm.
that's uncertain, that's afraid, and that needs some confidence in what they can do and what they should be doing. So in that, I learned a ton of evidence, like through PT school, like we were driven evidence-based protocols. So by looking through all the evidence and diving into more and more research, you just start to find what is good research and what is poor research. A blog article is great, it's
Mm.
not research.
Yeah.
A case report's a great start, it's not good qualified research. People will say these things, but they don't have the evidence to back it. So I always struggled with, well, if you're saying these things, you should be backing it. And when we take this literature that's out there and we really start breaking it down, it came down to a few things that really led to healing. And those things were safety,
Mm.
psychological safety. And this is research not just in the health field, but in business fields and like student interviews,
Sure.
that Google spent a ton of money to figure out, why do some teams perform really well and why do some teams not perform as well. So they brought in these researchers, spent millions of dollars. The number one variable that emerged was psychological safety.
Wow.
Yeah, and so many times we're telling people that this is how you should run, this is how you should squat, this is how you deadlift,
Yeah.
this is how you skip, all these things. Well, no one ever taught you that when
Mm.
you were a kid, right? You felt safe, and because your system felt safe, you then felt like you could do that because you weren't afraid of failure. Because if you failed, you weren't going to get rejected by your parents. I always make the joke, like when a toddler starts walking, they fall 17 times per hour.
Wow.
Not one time does a parent go, "You call that walking? Your form was terrible. What the heck are you doing?"
Sure.
But as we enter into adulthood, the script switches on us.
Mhm.
What we do at work, our boss is telling us that's not enough. What we do at home, our family's telling us that's not enough. We start to feel like we're more just trying to survive instead of thrive.
Yeah.
We're built with all the things inside of us needed for healing,
Yeah.
but we can't experience that if we don't feel safe. So we have to get back to safety. How do we get back to safety? It's the language we use, it's the protocols that are done, it's the treatments that are prescribed, and it's the environments that we live in. So when we started shifting through all this research of, why is one exercise effective for this population but not this population? And you said it beautifully earlier. It's not just in an office.
Yeah.
They're in the office 30 minutes, maybe to an hour. If they're in a medical office, 10 minutes.
Mm.
2 hours of wait time, but 10 minutes of actual treatment time.
Yeah.
they're going back to the environment that is creating the issue. So we have to respect that, and we
Mhm.
have to honor that and start giving people tools to be able to respond instead of react. That's where the blueprint came from is one, we have to understand how our experience as a human is created.
Mhm.
We have to know our neuroanatomy and how our brain works and how our brain works off of prediction. Once we understand that fundamental principle and what the science shows us in neuroanatomy, we then start to understand why we behave in certain ways. We start to understand why environment affects us. We start to understand why language affects us. We start to understand why we do have these symptoms. And then having that understanding, now we have that knowledge. Well, now we can start to shift. Our perspective is shifting, but now let's start using tools to help get us to that finish line.
Wow, that's so good. There's so much to dive into that, so thank you. Wow, so it's not just, someone comes in because they, threw their arm out or because they twisted their ankle. There's something going on mentally. There's something going on in their environment. There's something going on potentially in their community that could all build up to the fact that their ankle's hurting or that their shoulder's hurting or that there's some sort of pain. And so you mentioned, you as a provider, your field as a provider, we need to start doing the things that these people need to create safety.
Mhm,
And the subtitle of Hope Not Nope is using hope for healing and reclaiming identity as a lifelong athlete in a sick healthcare system.
mhm.
And so what is that like? Because you're saying like, oh, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do, but it sounds like in a lot of ways maybe the healthcare system isn't doing that, but this book is a resource not just for maybe people who are athletes or people who used to be athletes in high school but don't work out anymore because of X, Y, or Z, but it's also potentially for people in your field who need to maybe look at these things in a different light. Share more a little bit about the different audience of people who are going to read this great this great work, but also like what you hope that they can receive from it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the main message in here is turning all the rejection and feeling like we're frail, fragile, and broken, all the nope into hope. And
Yeah.
once we have hope, the healing system is going to kick off. I work with this one client who is just beautiful lake house.
Mm.
And during spring, summer, and fall, I'd be working with him, and there'd be a cardinal that came to the window and would just start pecking at the window. So I would always kind of laugh at it, but just having a curious brain, I was like, huh, why does the cardinal keep doing that? Learned from my client that the cardinal sees its reflection and is actually fighting against itself.
Wow.
So now I see that cardinal come, and instead of laughing, my thought is, dang, we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
We're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And to back that, I'll give some examples here. The MLB with the shoulders rotator cuffs, they do the most violent motion in sports with throwing a baseball. 89 to 91% of them have a torn rotator cuff and have no symptoms whatsoever.
Wow.
92% have a torn labrum and have no symptoms whatsoever.
Wow.
They're still pitching, they're still playing, they're going about their day. What we found from the research and in the science is that people used to have pain, they'd go into the provider would do an image, and then on the image they would say, this is why your pain is happening because of what's happening on this image right here.
Mm.
Researchers got clever and they said, what if we started imaging people that don't have symptoms? Like, let's just take a picture of people that aren't in pain.
Mhm.
And they started doing that, and it was really a shift that happened of, wow, more of the population has a disc herniation with no symptoms than the population that has a disc herniation with symptoms.
Wow.
More people have torn rotator cuffs with no symptoms than people that have torn rotator cuffs with symptoms.
Mhm.
And again, like you get one article of this and it's like, oh wow. But when it's repeated over and over again, it
Sure.
starts to really get to you
Of
and
course.
start to wonder, why the heck are we doing images before we ever even talk to people and get the full story? Why aren't we asking questions of, how's your work life? How's your personal life? How is sleep going? What's your nutrition like? All these factors that make you human. What's your environment like? Instead, we're just taking a picture, and now that picture is coming from a respected figure, and because the respected figure is saying that there's something wrong with you, your brain now has to believe that something's wrong with you. But deep down, you know it's not there. You know,
Wow.
if I've had degenerative joint disease for 30 years, why all of a sudden does it hurt now?
Right.
Why didn't it progressively get worse over time? Why does it hurt now in this moment? Oh, it's the same time that your kids are leaving for college and you have to reconnect with your wife.
Mm.
Potentially you're going through a divorce and those symptoms come on. But we're really learning that pain is a complicated experience, but it's really a threat to the perception that we're going to lose meaningful activity.
Mm.
And if I'm told that there's something wrong in my body, so because of X, I can't do Y, now I'm afraid I'm going to lose meaningful activity. And what is that meaningful activity? It could be picking up a basketball, playing with your kids. It could be throwing a football with your grandchildren. It could be you work in a warehouse and your sport is that you lift boxes for 12 hours a day. Someone told you you have a bad back. Now you're wondering, how am I going to provide for my family?
Mm.
This is what I do to put food on the table. So whether it's provider, whether it's an athlete, whether it was an ex-athlete, once you're an athlete, you're always an athlete. There's no such thing as an ex-athlete,
Sure.
but it's more important that you're living out the values of an athlete. And I really just want to empower people with the understanding of what's actually happening and the true healing potential that our body has once we get out of the way. Once we start fighting against ourselves over and over again, which is what the sick healthcare system is doing, because what are they paid off of? They're not paid off of a successful outcome for you as a patient.
Mm.
They're paid off of the tests that are done, the medications that are prescribed, and the procedures that are done.
Wow.
They're not paid off of how well you do in those things.
Mm-hmm.
So the providers, there's some great providers out there that are stuck in the system that, well, I should do that x-ray because I got to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And it's not fair to providers. It's not fair to the people that are consumers to the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's honestly, and I don't say this lightly, we're on the verge of a healthcare collapse.
Mm.
Diabetes is rapidly increasing. Cardiovascular disease is rapidly increasing. All these things are increasing, and we don't have the tools to take care of it because we've gotten so far away from what is really creating the pain experience and what's going to create the solutions.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Wow. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for just being honest and transparent about how you're seeing the healthcare system struggling, how you're seeing people struggling. And I want to point out one thing that you said specifically. You said that, we need to get out of our own way. And I would love for you to just elaborate on that more. What does it mean to get out of our own way? What does it mean to, open ourselves up to a different sort of healing, and probably the healing that we most need, but we have to get out of our way first. So what does that look like? I know that in the book you provided so many different resources between positive self-talk and gratitude and finding community, but share more about that, and what is part of the solution?
Yeah, I always start by saying it's simple,
Mm,
but it's not easy.
of course.
We have to be willing to not accept comfort in these
Mm,
scenarios. I was at a leadership conference a few summers ago, and one of the presenters said, when there's a storm, the buffalo goes towards the storm. The other cows run away from the storm. And he goes on to say that the bull that faces the storm ends up decreasing their amount of suffering because they get through the storm faster
wow.
than the cows that run away from the storm. They're running with the storm's following them.
Hmm.
So for us to get to that point, we have to face some of the storms that have been created in our lives. It's not easy. It's a lot easier to accept where you're at, to accept the rejection that's been put onto you, to accept that you can't do these things because some evidence came from a provider that's actually misinformed and now gives you evidence to say, I can't do these things. You have to be willing to go against the grain. You have to get out of your own way because the brain loves rewards
Mm.
and it likes short-term gratification. Our whole society is set up right now with short-term gratification. How many likes do you get on a video? How many comments do you get? All of these false realities, but these short-term boosts in dopamine that we get, our brain loves that, so it wants to seek that. We have to be willing to say, I don't want to be part of this microwave oven society. I'm willing to slow cook. I'm willing to face things that happened in my childhood, and I'm willing to work through those. even though it's going to be hard to bring up those things. But working through those and eventually getting to forgiveness, like when you experience forgiveness and the weight that's lifted off your shoulders, it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah.
So it's not easy, but it's 99.999% worth it to get to those stages.
Mhm. Wow, thank you so much. I think that I'm grateful to live in a culture where sure there are people who are part of the microwave society, but I feel like slowly through their weed work, there's a lot of people who do want to better themselves. They want to improve their quality of life in whatever way they can. And I'm thankful to be part of a generation that is slowly starting to get back into that. And I think that it's easy for us to look and see the ways that people have stayed in the system, but I do think that there are people who are going against the grain. And so you sharing the need for that, but also sharing that the people who are part of the system need to start taking that step outside, that it's so needed. It's so needed right now. And not just for, 20 or 30-year-olds, it's needed for 50, 60, 70-year-olds. If they were an athlete when they were 20, they can be an athlete when they're 70. And I think that that's exactly what you're striving to speak in your work and just everything you do as a person, that's what you desire to show.
Mm.
And so I want to go back and just kind of dive into, what is meaningful activity. You used a few examples, and I thought of people in my family growing up that they would watch us play outside, but as adults they wouldn't join in because they were afraid their back would get thrown out or their shoulder would dislocate, or there was always these fears about their body starting to hurt. And I look back and I'm wondering, well, I wonder what trauma potentially they had gone through that is, or what the stress that they were going through. As a 10-year-old kid, I didn't realize my dad was stressed at work or whatever it
Yeah.
may have been. So what is meaningful activity, and how does a 70-year-old who has been in the system for 70 years decide, no, I still can improve my quality of life at 70 years old, and I want to have forgiveness. I want to have safety, like we've mentioned, but I want to have meaningful activity, and I want to show, my children and my grandchildren and maybe my great grandchildren that you don't have to stay in a box your entire life.
That's a great question. I think the first place to start is that we don't know people's stories.
Mm,
We don't know why they're on the sidelines. We don't know how hard it is for them to put on a smile every day. And for people listening and watching, if you want to start with something simple that's not easy, just smile at people. Like wave to them.
yeah.
Be nice to people that are serving you in the community. Like a smile to someone goes such a long way. I know before I went through my own healing, if I saw a homeless person on the street, I would roll up my window, lock my door, and just be like, don't make eye contact, don't make eye
Mm,
contact. Where now I'll roll down my window and just say hi.
yeah.
Just, hey, how's your day going? They're so happy.
Yeah.
They don't ask for money. They don't ask for food. They're just like, holy crap, another human being acknowledged my existence.
Yeah.
Another person saw that I mattered
Mm,
today. Like that's incredible. We don't know the story that led to that person being on the street. Like we don't know. Once we learn that story, it's a gift and it's an honor for people to open up. And I'm so thankful that I've got to work with people that did open up and have shared their sufferings with me,
mm,
because it really opened my eyes to what is meaningful activity and what brought people away from it. So I think what brings people away is the rejection, the fear that you were saying.
mm,
But what is meaningful activity? It's specific to that person. It's
yeah.
it's specific to you and what you want to do. I know for me, I want to show the next generation in my family that our outcome doesn't have to be dementia. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be Alzheimer's. You don't have to pass from chronic disease. You can pass peacefully, and it starts with what you do today. Am I perfect in that? No. Sunday football, I'm going to have a couple chicken wings. Like
Yeah.
it's going to happen. But
Sure.
let's get back on track as soon as we can and start realizing that what we're doing now is going to impact the future.
Mm,
So for me, that's my meaningful activity. Working out, it's difficult. It's much easier to sit on the couch, throw on Netflix, and watch a movie every night. But if I do that, I'm not creating a different path for my family to see that this is possible.
Mm.
So that's what drives me. That's my meaningful activity. People might say my meaningful activity is that I want to throw a football with my grandchild one day.
Mhm.
And I challenge that person. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you want to throw a football with your grand? You can take them to a park. You can take them to an amusement park. You can take them to a beach. You can take them for. There's a lot of ways you
Sure.
can create meaningful activities. So why a football? Well, when I played football, it gave me brotherhood.
Mm.
It taught me how to sacrifice your being for other people around you. It taught me how to be more of a servant-based leader. It taught me that I need to train to not let down the people around me. It taught me how to be vulnerable because you're supposed to be tough and you're supposed to be angry. But I had an injury and I cried on the field.
Mm.
It taught me these life lessons that it's no longer just about a spiral football. It's about all the lessons that are in that spiral.
Yeah.
So it's not just shooting a basketball. It's what did that sport give to that person that
Mm.
they now want to give to the next generation. So how do you do it? How do you do it when you've been through this suffering for 20, 30, 40, 50 years? It's never too late.
Yeah.
That's the gift of the human body is that it is incredibly adaptable. It is resilient. It is robust. It will grow to the forces placed upon it. You can make a change at any point. We were just watching this video the other day. CrossFit Open's going on at this time of the season. There's a 92-year-old female
Yeah.
that started CrossFit when she was 89 years old. And they asked her, why do you do this? And she goes, I love the way my body's adapting to this stimulus. 89 years old, her body's adapting. What's our excuse?
Yeah.
It's it's just that you have to take those first steps. You have to have some faith that if you take this one step, it's going to lead you to where you want to go. And you just have to keep taking those steps little by
Yeah.
little. Maybe it's you walk to your mailbox and back
Mm.
7 days a week. And then you say, I'm going to do that twice. And then I'm going to do it 4 times. And you keep developing it. You keep progressively overloading it. You're going to get there. You just have to start.
Yeah. Wow. I love hearing that. And I think that's what this whole your whole message in the book, but also just who you are as a person, as a provider, you want people to have hope. And that's what that is, that not living in fear, not letting yourself, stay on the couch, but really saying, I'm going to try today. And it's scary. It's probably nerve-wracking. You might not even want to. You might not have the drive to, but the hope is taking that one step. The hope is looking outside of yourself and saying, I want to do this for my grandchild someday. The hope is, taking a step outside of yourself and saying, I matter. My quality of life matters. And I think that's what you're trying to share in this book is your life matters. And there's so much we can dive into the book. I think before we start wrapping up, I'd love to hear just the most practical tool besides taking that first step, because I think people can take the first step and they have to create the habit, right? Because I think I can take a first step for a week, but then on that eighth day I'm like, I don't really feel like it anymore,
Yeah.
and I think we all can have those habits of not continuing. And so what's one practical advice that maybe you wrote in the book, or maybe you've come to learn since writing the book, that you want to share, just as people start taking these steps into hope, as they get rid of the nope, as they get rid of the idea that they have to live in that suffering, that they have to live in their injury, that they have to live in their depression, or whatever it is, as they grow out of the nope, what's that one practical thing besides that first step that
Yeah.
hope brings?
Yeah. I'll try to limit it to one,
You can do
but
two or three if you
maybe I'll
want.
give two. It all starts with being curious
Yeah.
and knowing that it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to stand up for yourself. If you have questions and you're going to an expert, because when you have pain, there's so much uncertainty. You're not going in necessarily to get a solution. You want a solution,
Of course.
but you're going in to get some certainty in this uncertain situation.
Hmm.
You have to be curious. You have to be comfortable to ask these questions. You have to be okay to challenge what the norm is. Quick example I can give here, it's one that I write about in the book and one that I'm like trying to change in sports, but the rice principle.
Hmm.
Rest, ice, compress, elevate. You have an injury, slap ice on there, rest, elevate it, get a wrap on there, don't move. Wait a few days and then start movement. That was coined in 1978 by Dr. Robert Merkin. Data started coming out showing that ice might delay the healing process
Wow.
because we need inflammation for healing. We need to stop trying to take inflammation away, let it aid in the healing process,
Yeah.
and start moving early. So Robert Merkin actually has come out and said, I think it was in 2010, but he said, people have used my rice principle for decades. Please stop using it
Wow.
because the data shows that this isn't what you should be doing for
Yeah.
injuries. But the truth is that we see it on movies. We see it at the professional levels that an athlete gets hurt and there's an ice bag being wrapped around their knee or hip or shoulder or whatever it may be. And we have to be curious because what led to that principle being challenged is someone asking, if inflammation kicks off the healing process, then why would we want to take it away in the beginning?
Mm.
Wouldn't it make more sense if we had that and let it aid in the healing process, which then led to research, which then led to these findings that's now changing this principle
Yeah.
that we all thought was quote unquote a law, that when
Right.
you have an injury, this is what you should do. It all starts with being curious. And then the second step is gratitude.
Mm.
And not just the gratitude in the sense of I'm thankful for being here, but I'm thankful for all the past experiences that I've had that have led me to this point. I look back at my own journey and the sufferings and adversity and things that I faced, and going through it, I couldn't make sense of it.
Of course.
I didn't know why it was happening. You start like, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my family? Why is this happening to my friends? Why is this happening to my colleagues? Like, why? And now I'm thankful
Mm.
for those things. Those events have shifted my perspective. They have sculpted me into finding hope and what hope does for healing. There's so many things to be grateful for. Our body's creating new cells every single day. Every time we have a breath, there's people out here that don't have their breath.
Mm.
If you can get out of bed and even just sit up under your own power and take a breath under your own power, you should be grateful. You
Yeah.
should be really grateful.
Yeah.
And I get it that like people might not be there yet. So start with the smaller things and then work towards that. And very soon you'll start finding
Hmm.
where this leads. And it's super interesting. I have this one older patient that 2 years ago we started working on, along with movement, we started doing a gratitude practice. His heart rate and blood pressure went from being hypertensive and tachycardic to now normal rates of like a 20 to 30-year-old.
Wow.
No medications. The physicians are like, what'd you do? You must have taken salt out of your diet.
Mm.
Like it must be salt that's causing this. Been practicing gratitude.
Wow.
It's lifted him up. It's made his relationship with his wife better.
Mm.
It's made the way he communicates with his kids and his grandchildren better. And it all started with a simple practice of gratitude.
Yeah.
So be curious and be grateful.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love to hear that, and it's just it's so good. It's so good, and I think it's a perspective that we all need. We need a perspective shift. We need something to get us out of the way that we're living and get us on a path of healing and of hope. And so I appreciate you for being here. I thank you for being here, and I thank you for this great conversation because this helps me with my perspective and to me grow to be more hopeful and more healed and all more grateful, of course. But this perspective also is helping our viewers, and it's allowing our viewers to, like I said at the beginning, sit back and soak it all in. As we end our conversation, I hope that whoever's listening, whoever's watching, that you don't just turn it off and then go into the next thing, but take 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes to really just sit with this information and all that you've learned and be curious about it, be grateful for it, and see the ways that it can really help you as a person. And so, as we close, I would love for you to just share what's the last thing on your heart that you want to speak to our viewers, to the people listening, that, they can have greater hope and that they can grow. And, this book is phenomenal. I ask that you all read it or listen to it and really just dive into it. But what's that last thing that you wanna leave with the people listening?
Yeah, I think what I'd want to leave you with is that you've been told you're not enough. You've been told that you're weak. You've been rejected. You've failed. People have ridiculed you. There's all these beliefs that have been put into your being. It's not the end of your story. Your story's not complete yet. There's so much more ahead of you. We hear this saying all the time of you're stuck with the hand that you got dealt. And that is not the case. You can take control of this. You can learn how to respond instead of reacting to situations. And you can really become that person that you desire to be. Dreams are put onto our heart for a very specific reason. And the world becomes more alive. People become more happy. It becomes a better planet for us to live in when people are pursuing those dreams. So it's okay to dream. You should dream. You should love your dreams. You should love your being. You can get there. It starts with taking all that nope and understanding that it was put on your plate for a very particular reason. We all face different nopes, but now it's up to you to now shift that into hope.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you all, and I hope that this blessed your life. I hope that it was so good for you. And again, don't run away right now, but take a few moments to really soak it in and remember you can dream, you can be hopeful, and that your life starts today. So I thank you all for being here. Dr. Dillon Caswell, I thank you for being here. I thank you for your great work, and I hope that so many people can dive into it and share it with others as well. So thank you so much.